experience here. You know, in the past, you've been dealing with communication systems where people are able to exchange everything from retail information to personal information, and it was kind of buyer beware in the retail world. In the financial world, people transact business because they can trust that the transactions are going to be secure from the standpoint of the stability of the dollar or whatever they're exchanging their money in. There's the secrecy of the activity. There's consumer protections as well as you know, not being able to do things in a illegal fashion. So that takes a lot of regulation. And as you're finding out, regulation is an important part of the financial services world to be able to give people those kinds of protections and earn that trust. So you've indicated already that you want to conform to the regulation to be able to do this and earn that trust. Can you continue to, the first question is, can you continue to innovate and be able to make the changes to this product as it needs to be able to conform to the regulation and still be able to make this work? Do you believe that that can happen?
Congressman, I currently do. I think we'll have to see how this process plays out, but I do, sitting here today.
Are you willing to stop this project if you see that it can't go forward anymore?
Congressman, I will certainly stop Facebook's part of it. The Independent Libra Association is a separate thing that exists at this point, and if I feel like Facebook can't be a part of it in keeping with the principles that I've laid out, then Facebook won't be a part of it.
I want to follow up on Mr. Sherman's line of questioning with regards to the reserve currency. What effect do you think that you get implemented, Libra implemented here, that this would have on the reserve status of the U.S. dollar?
Congressman, because the reserve will be primarily U.S. dollars, I actually think that a project like this could be important for extending America's financial leadership and to the contrary of the risks that are being pointed out. We have to be careful about all of the risks around financial stability, and there are certain regulators who oversee that, and we're also mindful of that. We want to do something that strengthens America's leadership. But I just think that we can't sit here and assume that because America is today the leader, that it will always get to be the leader if we don't innovate. And innovation means doing new things, okay. And that does mean, and the new things have risks, and we need to address the risks, and we need to be careful in doing that. But I personally worry that if we don't do things like this, whether it's this project or others like it, then eventually we lose our leadership.
My time is, I appreciate the fact that you're pointing out that China is already doing this. That means if we're going to allow them to play in this area, we need to be looking at it as well. You know, and I think right now the Calibra says that, what, 50% of the currencies that are in the basket here that they use to set the value of this is a dollar. Is that correct?
Congressman, I don't know if that's been fully finalized, but I think the principle is that it will be primarily
My concern, though, is that right now that's good for the United States, but what happens whenever the board of Calibra decides that, you know, the Chinese yuan suddenly is, because of the economy, looks to be a very stable currency and a growing currency and importance in the world, and suddenly they diminish our amount down to 1/3 of the value of the basket of currencies, and now the yuan is 1/3, and suddenly now we have a really big problem from the standpoint that the currency that is being utilized most around the world is the Libra, and we are only 1/3 of that. That to me is concerning. Does that concern you at all? That the association could set this and we would have nothing about it, and it would be a negative effect on our position?
Congressman, that is certainly something that I think we should look at up front. And I can't speak for the Independent Association on this, but I think it would be completely reasonable for our regulators to try to impose a restriction that says that it has to be primarily U.S. dollars. Okay,
one more quick question, and I don't know if the chairman will give me enough time for you to answer this, but what is the advantage of Facebook to be involved in Libra?
Sorry, what is the advantage of Facebook being involved
of your company, Facebook, to be involved in Libra? What is the end game for you to be able to realize a benefit from this?
Well, Congressman, we build some of the most widely used messaging services around the world, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And the vision here is to make it so that people can send money to each other as easily and securely and cheaply as it is to send a text message. So I think that sending money would be a very useful utility to add for people around the world in addition to the messaging products that we have.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, who is also the chair for the subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, the Housing Rights Initiative, a DC-based watchdog group and an aggrieved DC woman, have recently filed human rights complaints in DC and Maryland against 7 major housing companies who are accused of using Facebook's ad targeting tools to deny prospective tenants the ability to see housing ads based on their age, which is a protected class under local fair housing laws. The lawsuit also alleges that Facebook's algorithm disproportionately showed the ads to younger users. Mr. Zuckerberg, do you agree to comply with any potential subpoenas and document requests Facebook might receive seeking information about how housing companies have discriminated?
Congressman, I imagine that if it's a valid subpoena, we will certainly comply with it. Our legal team will.
Well, will Facebook agree to produce information about the algorithm it uses to decide which ads users receive?
Congressman, for a bit of background here, it has always been against our policies for people to use any of our products, and especially our ad products, to discriminate. We recently, as you know, entered into a settlement with the ACLU and other civil rights groups to remove certain targeting features from advertising, so that way if you're doing targeting for housing, employment, or credit opportunities, you can't target based on age or gender or zip code. And we also limited the number of interest-based targeting options that were available there as well.
Yeah, but for so many years, your company engaged in that kind of conduct. Was that because it was a lack of awareness as far as your employees are concerned, as far as having a sensitivity to inclusion, diversity, and non-discrimination?
Congressman, it's always been against our policies for anyone to use the ad systems to discriminate, and we enforce those policies through a mix of technical systems and human review. When this complaint was filed by the ACLU and others, we were able to reach a settlement that we thought would strengthen our policies and our products and help them uphold the principles that we care about and have always been committed to on this. Part of this is also agreeing to study further the effects of how the algorithm works and what it shows. One of the challenges that we have here that I think it's worth calling out is that we don't collect data on the race or ethnicity of people who use Facebook. So that is somewhat of a challenge in trying to study whether there are disparate impacts or issues. And it's an open question from my perspective whether one would want us to collect race data on the people who use our services, but that's one of the questions that we'll need to figure out as we're studying this further.
And let me follow up with that and ask, despite Facebook's commitments to address civil rights, there is no one in Facebook's senior leadership with substantial civil rights experience. Why is this?
Congressman, this is certainly something we care about a lot. We have people at the company who've worked on civil rights. Recently, we started this civil rights audit that's being led by very established folks in the civil rights movement, and Sheryl Sandberg, our COO, is personally leading a civil rights task force that we formalized inside the company to make sure that we implement suggestions from the audit and to make sure that this receives senior attention at the company.
Is the audit independent? Is it independent or is it from within the company?
Congressman, yes, the audit is independent. It is being done by Laura Murphy, who I think is an established leader in the space.
Familiar with Laura Murphy? Are they allowed to publicly report whatever problems they find?
Congressman, yes, the reports that they're making as part of the audit will be public, and I think that they've already also published some things.
Do you have a right to limit what is said publicly about the audit?
Congressman, I'm not sure the answer to that. I think at a high level the answer would be no, but there may be some specific things around if there's individuals' private data or business confidential data or something like that where they might not publish it. But broadly speaking, they're going to be able to publish what they believe and what they find.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizinga, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Zuckerberg, you have accomplished something that nobody, and I mean nobody, thought was possible. Brad Sherman, Chair Waters, many on the other side of the aisle, actually agree with and, in fact, use tweets by the president to support their position. I never thought I would see the day, but here we are. You have taken the puzzle pieces of politics, shaken up the box, thrown them out on the table, and everybody's trying to figure out where they fit when it comes to Facebook and when it comes to this technology use. I don't fault you for what your tool has become, because I do believe it is a tool. I want to explore that a little bit, but first my question is, what share of Calibra is Facebook? I know it's an association. I'm sorry, of Libra is Facebook. So it's an association that you've referenced. I mean, do you own half of it? Is it equal shares among all the partners? David Marcus, who had been at Facebook, is heading up Calibra. Is it one and the same? Is Calibra Facebook?
Okay, Congressman, there are two organizations here. There's the Independent Libra Association.
Yep, that's what I'm wanting to get to know.
Which is a nonprofit. So it's not a for-profit entity that there's ownership.
So but how does the vote, here's what I'm trying to get at. How does the voting go? Is it what David Marcus says? Is it what Facebook says? Or is it you can be overruled by others in the association?
That's correct. Right now, there are 21 companies and nonprofits. There are a lot more that want to join. Each company and nonprofit organization that's a member has one vote in electing the board. Right now, there are 5 board members. David Marcus is one of the board members, but is not running Calibra.
Well, he's been here, in fact, sat where you sat.
Sorry, I just misspoke. He's not running Libra. He is running Calibra, which is Facebook's payment subsidiary. But we are looking for, the Libra Association is recruiting an independent director, and David is not even on the search committee for that.
Okay, so here's, I asked him the question because it had been put forward that Switzerland was where you were going to domicile this, or the association was going to domicile. He had said that he had been talking to the Swiss regulators. The Swiss regulators said that he hadn't been talking to them and that the association hadn't been talking to them. So I'd like you to clarify that. Have you been talking to the Swiss regulators?
Congressman, yes. And the misunderstanding there was that I believe that he and the team had been working with the primary Swiss financial regulator, FINMA, and now we're also working with the data regulator, which is going to be relevant.
You say that you've worked with 30 different jurisdictions in examining this. Can you provide us with a list of the regulators that you have talked to?
Congressman, I can get back to you with the full list.
Okay, that'd be great. That's all I want. It's not a trick question. Just want to know that. I'd also like to know which U.S. regulators you have been talking to.
Congressman, are you asking about me personally or our team?
Well, I mean, you use the royal we on page 3 of your testimony. I'm assuming it's not you specifically. I'm assuming it's you and your team. But I want to know who Facebook and Calibra and Libra have all been talking to in the U.S., because I think one of the questions that I have is why Switzerland and why not the U.S. a little bit about as the ranking member had started to go down there. And I want to move quickly on that, though. But will you get me a list of those U.S. regulators?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Here's the real crux. You said that you won't launch without U.S. regulator approval. What happens if the association decides to launch despite that?
Congressman, then I believe we would be forced to leave the association. I would hope that that the association will weigh our recommendation and what we say publicly that we think should happen. But if at the end of the day, we don't receive the clearances that we feel like we need to move forward, and the association chooses to move forward without us, then we will be in a position where we will not be a part of the association.
My remaining 30 seconds here, as I said, I believe Facebook is a tool. I believe cryptocurrency and Libra is a tool. I believe all technology is a tool. It's a neutral tool, just like a car, a plane, a gun, a knife, all of which have been used as weapons for nefarious things at times, and all of things that have been used to benefit. These various tools are in society, though, regulated. And whether it's Ms. Wagner's concern and all of our concern about child sexual exploitation or others, you need to help us understand where the line between people's First Amendment rights, yours, mine, all of society's lie, and the safety of our society, regardless of the platform or tool. So I'd like to continue that conversation at some point.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you for joining us today. Back during the 1960s and 70s, Congress passed a series of laws intended to stamp out discrimination in lending and housing. And both Republicans and Democrats in Congress worked together and passed legislation like the Community Reinvestment Act and the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. All of these laws were designed to target and stop discrimination in the sale and advertising of housing, and in particularly redlining. Redlining is a series of practices of cordoning off certain groups of people by race, by geographic area, and systematically refusing to lend to those communities. And we're even suffering right today from the aftershock of these practices. Now, it is my understanding, Mr. Zuckerberg, that Facebook allows advertisers to target their messages to certain users or groups of users, both directly by identifying their race, their gender, or age, but also by indirectly targeting their education, their interests, their location, their income. And in its investigation, HUD, our federal housing agency, found that your platform allowed advertisers to restrict certain users from viewing ads on your platform. And you have even enabled the practice of this dreaded redlining of certain communities, restricting them from housing and employment opportunities. You were charged with this by our federal agency that protects our housing and lending laws. And Mr. Zuckerberg, we in Congress have worked hard for the past 50 years to eliminate the very racial discrimination practices that your platform is guilty of. On your platform, you screen for and you prevent all sorts of criminal activities, such as sex trafficking, drug trafficking. Even as you mentioned a few minutes ago, you outlaw payday lending, terrorism, illegal drugs. Why don't you prevent redlining, which is also illegal and criminal as well?
Congressman, we do now. Our policies have always been that discrimination is not allowed. We recently entered into a settlement with civil rights groups, ACLU and others, and NFHA to remove certain categories from our targeting, including age, gender, and zip code.
You say to remove.
It's implemented.
You haven't said we have removed. There's a difference.
My understanding is this is already implemented. If I'm incorrect on that, I will get back to you quickly and update you. But my understanding is that that is already in effect.
But, Mr. Zuckerman, I have here HUD's report, and it clearly says that your platform allows advertisers to restrict certain users from viewing ads on your platform, and you have even enabled the practice of redlining certain communities. What is your answer? What was your response to HUD? Have you put things in practice to eliminate this?
Well, Congressman, I think at the beginning of the discussion with HUD and some of these groups that I just referenced, we entered into a settlement with the civil rights groups to create a new standard where we block that kind of targeting. And I think it's worth noting that the standard that we set is industry leading. Right? I don't think any of the other internet platforms restrict the kind of targeting that we do for these categories, but I think that doing so helps us uphold the principles around preventing discrimination. So I'm happy and supportive and glad that we're doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you holding this hearing. Mr. Zuckerberg, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
I understand. That was honest. Thank you. First, I want to say I appreciate innovation, and we need innovation in America. No innovation is going to be perfect. And to the questions that the gentleman was just asking, I want to let you maybe clarify a little bit. If I want to advertise housing on Facebook today, can I use age, sex, and
She's coming now, I think. Oh yeah, 20 seconds out. Shall I give you a 5-second warning? So you don't need me?
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Pippa Mills and I'm Deputy Chief Constable here in Essex Police. We've been progressing our investigations at the scene here in Grays throughout the day. In order to ensure that we maintain the dignity of the people who've sadly lost their lives, we will be moving the lorry and the trailer shortly. Once that movement has happened, we will remain here to complete some scene examinations before we can allow all the business operators back to their premises. I would like to thank them for their cooperation and support throughout the day. This matter has attracted national and international interest, and it's absolutely imperative that the operation is conducted with the utmost respect for the 39 people who've lost their lives. The lorry and the trailer will be moved to a secure location at Tilbury Docks so the bodies can be recovered whilst preserving the dignity of the victims. We're yet to identify them and must manage this sensitively with their families. I appreciate how much attention this incident will continue to attract and the public and media appetite to understand what's happened. We also need to understand what has happened, and Essex Police will be working with all of our partners to ensure this happens as quickly as possible. May I remind you all that we have a 25-year-old man in custody on suspicion of murder. I will not be commenting on speculation of the identity of this man. My ask of you all at this time is please, if you have any information which could help our investigation, please contact my detectives by calling Essex Police on 101. Also, we have 2 telephone numbers for anyone with concerns about relatives to call. Those numbers are 0800 056 0944 for those living inside the UK and 0044 207 158 0010 for those outside the UK. We will continue to issue information as soon as we're able to, but please, I do need to stress that this will be a lengthy inquiry. Thank you all very much.
Can you tell us